What's up? Today we're going to be talking about geometry, gender equality, and other cool subjects that help you play chess better. Well, I think that sounds weird. Let me try again. Today I'd love to present you with a couple rules based on chess geometry that allow you to evaluate positions easily, as well as to find proper moves easily without necessity to calculate a lot of variations. I hope that was better. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Here's the first example that's going to illustrate a pretty interesting idea. A straight line or zigzag, which one is faster? So first of all, let me clarify that white is moving up, so white is moving in that direction, and it is white to play. Now, how would you play here if you're playing white? Well, normally you want to bring your king and capture this pawn and then promote your own, right? But if we do that in the most straightforward fashion, playing king to e7, black will probably wish to bring their king closer just as well. Let's continue this line. So at the end of the day, we can see that black is able to lock white's king here in the corner. It can get out, and therefore then white can make no progress, and it's going to be a draw. Let's try again. This time we're gonna try a zigzag instead, and what's interesting is that in chess for the chess king, it takes the same amount of moves to reach the square of b7, whether you go in a straight line or through the zigzag. It takes the same 4 moves. But in this case, if you choose this route, king to e6, then in this variation you can see that along the way you pushed black's king away, right? Because black cannot approach here, black has to just waste some time. And then you continue your journey, and as we continue the line, at the end you see that white was faster in reaching this destination, and now you're going to play king b8 and promote your pawn forward, and white is completely winning. So that's one interesting rule, which is very useful, of course, especially in an endgame, where you can just notice that for your king, sometimes it's better to choose that zigzag path, because along the way you can also push your opponent away. Now, I promised to talk about gender equality, so let me bring this position up. It's actually very common. It's one of the must-know positions for every chess player, because very often at the end of the game, if you played well, you can end up with a position where you've got a queen against the lonely king of your opponent, and you need to know how to checkmate. Now, the common way is using this kind of snake method where you play queen to d3, and after that you just keep chasing opponent's king, going, up and down like this. You keep chasing, he tries to run away, and you keep chasing in this snake method all the way up to your opponent's king is forced to the corner, and after that you're going to need to bring your king closer and then checkmate your opponent. And it's all good, this method works, but the problem is you are usually playing blitz games, and you reach this position at the end of the game where you're running out of time. And you can see that it takes a whole lot of moves for you to corner your opponent's king. After that, it's still not the end. You're going to need a lot more moves to actually achieve the checkmating position. So that's one practical problem with this. There's also an ethical problem that, the queen is doing all the job, right? And the king is sitting here on the couch doing nothing. And the queen is obviously stressed out, overworked, and all that stuff. So how can we be true gentlemen and split up the work? So let's come back to the starting position, and you wouldn't believe that white can win this and achieve the checkmating position in just several moves, but that is true. But they gotta team up together, your king and queen. So here's the idea. If your king stands in front of your opponent's king, you want to use your queen from the opposite side, right? And then they're gonna kind of press your opponent's king from both sides, funneling it to the edge of the board. So let me show you what I mean by that. If we've got our king in front of opponent's king, we want to put our queen on the opposite direction. We want to put it backward, that way. So we still keep it close enough to your opponent's king so that it cuts off some squares, but we put it behind the king. Okay. Now your opponent will probably wish to keep the king in the center of the board, so we place on king e4, and then we bring our king forward. And now you can already notice that with only 2 moves, we already achieved the position where your opponent's king is significantly restricted. Our king is cutting it off these diagonals, and our king is controlling these 2 squares. You see that your opponent is already running out of squares to move, and our idea is to kind of push your opponent's king, restrict it, from the those areas and from this area, so that your opponent's king can only move to the edge of the board. That's where we want it to be, because that's where we can checkmate it. So that's our plan. And after your opponent goes king to f4, now we play the queen move, queen e6. Currently, there is only 1 square left for the opponent to play, which is also nice for you, because if you're playing a blitz game, you can actually pre-move, because you already know that your opponent has to go here. There is no other square to go to, so you can already pre-move your next move. And your next move is going to be king to g3. What's the beauty of this method is that we usually play moves in turn. You play 1 move with a king, 1 move with a queen, etc. Okay, so the previous move was with a queen. Now we're moving our king up, king to g3. Once again, there is only 1 square available for your opponent, is to king to h5, so you can again pre-move your next move. And after king to h5, you go king to f4, And now the final square for your opponent's king is king to h4, and after that you can checkmate it with queen to g4, or let's say queen to h6. So that's how quickly you get the job done, just by teaming up together and using this funnel method where you press your opponent's king from two different sides, funneling it to the edge of the board. The next must-know rule is the rule of the square, which is super helpful. And here's the position. It is white to play. Like, how would you normally think about this position? Well, normally you'll have to calculate it all the way through. And your way of thinking would be, I play this, he plays this, I play this, he plays this, and you're gonna need to calculate this lengthy variation to figure out whether you can or cannot promote your queen at the end of the day. But the much easier method, called the rule of the square, is that you're gonna need to draw a square by drawing this diagonal line in your mind all the way to the back rank, and then you form a complete square. And here's the thing, if your opponent's king can step into this square, it will be able to catch a pawn, and in this case it's going to be a draw. If your opponent's king cannot enter this square, then you're going to win. Your opponent's king will not be able to stop you. So in this position, for example, if it's black to move, black would be able to bring his king into the square, and it would be a draw. But if it's white to move, then white is one step ahead. White can play pawn to a4, and now white is ahead. So in this case, the square is going to be this way, and there is no way for your opponent to step into it because, you know, it's just too far away. So that's how you know the outcome of the game without any calculations, just by applying this simple rule. By the way, recently Magnus Carlsen confessed that he learned the rule of the square from TikTok. What a crazy time we're living in. Another useful rule that works also not only in an endgame, but in an opening and in the middle game just as well, is that you can restrict your opponent's knight if you put your bishop 2 squares away. The trick is it simply controls all the same squares. So your opponent would wish to move his knight, you know, somewhere here or here or here or here, but your bishop is doing a great job controlling all of these squares and cutting the knight off, so that currently it is completely passive. There is no way for black to bring it into the game. And besides the bishop, you can also do the same trick with other pieces. For example, you can use your queen just as well. It does all the same, but in addition to that, it also hits the knight, which is an extra nice bonus. You can even use a pawn, which is slightly less effective, but nevertheless, it does the job at least partially. So it takes away these 2 squares where your opponent's knight could possibly go to, and still, you know, the knight remains to be more or less passive. That works even in an opening, and by the way, so many players are unaware of this and just play around in many different openings. For example, I've just created a very natural opening position, and in this position or in some similar positions, very often I see people are playing knight to d2 for some reason. And the problem with this move is that it just falls into the trap that we talked about previously. Currently, black has this pawn controlling these 2 squares, and so we've got our knight, which is unable to move forward at all. And so from this square, it's going to be harder for white to make use of this knight. Of course, I'm not saying that white's completely losing. It's still completely playable. But anyway, you're making your knight less active, and you'll have to somehow reposition it in the future to a better square, and take an extra time for doing so. You can also dominate your opponent's knight with your rook, but then the rule is different. So let's take a look at this position. It is white to move, and normally a knight versus a rook is a draw. And like in this position, black should be able to achieve a draw, but it is white to move, and white can use the rule we were talking about, and it's called the diagonal opposition rule for the rook versus knight. So by the way, that's the only move that wins. Any other move leads to a draw, because black will just bring his knight closer to his king and would achieve a draw. But if it's white to play, white's gonna need to play a rook to d5, achieving this diagonal opposition where it stands in this diagonal, and there's 1 square in between them. And what it does is, once again, it just takes away all the squares where black's knight could possibly go to, thus restricting the knight completely. And now the knight is completely out of the game, and white simply wins. So in the future, if black has to do something, white can also bring the king closer and use what we talked about previously. Putting the king 2 squares away from the knight, where it takes away these 2 squares. So white is using all the methods we talked about to restrict opponent's knight. And on the next move, after black goes, let's say king a4, we can finally play rook to b5, and now all the squares are taken away, and we're going to capture the knight on the next move and win the game. So that's how these simple geometrical rules help you to win when you know how to apply them. Today we've been talking rather about an endgame. If you wish to know how to improve your middle game and what's the process of finding the right plan in any position, you may attend my free masterclass by clicking the link over there. Also consider subscribing if you haven't already to not miss out on my next videos, and I'll talk to you soon.